And this reading is technically divided into two parts, and when we read it in the funeral narrative, we only hear the first half of the gospel reading in a slightly different version of it, where Jesus ends by saying that he is the resurrection and the life. And then we get today the larger narrative, where that first part has already happened, and then we see the raising of Lazarus. And I like the whole story together, but the lectionary reading often divides it. But when we put the whole story together, it is probably my favorite story in the entire Bible. And what I love about it is that this reading, in my opinion, encapsulates my entire theology of Jesus. In the Episcopal Church, we believe that Jesus is fully human and fully divine. And we say that because we believe Jesus is fully divine because throughout all of the gospel narratives, including this reading, Jesus performs miracles that only a God could do. Only God can make dead people come back out of the tomb alive again. Only God can have people who are blind see again. Only God can perform the many miracles that Jesus performs in all of the Gospels. And yet we say that Jesus is fully human. And the main reason that we say that Jesus is fully human is actually because of the crucifixion, that Jesus died on the cross. And the fact that Jesus died on the cross is central to our faith. And the theology of God is that gods cannot die. So if Jesus fully died on the cross and was dead in the tomb for 3 days, then Jesus has to be fully human because only humans die. Gods cannot die. That's the main argument for why we believe that Jesus is fully human. But then throughout the gospel narratives, we see human interactions of Jesus. And for me, this reading encapsulates the divinity of Jesus, where Jesus raises someone who has been previously dead for 4 days and someone who is fully human. And so this reading starts with Jesus. We go back in the reading from John. This reading starts with his friends telling him that his friend Lazarus and Martha and Mary that Lazarus is very sick. And Jesus takes his time getting to Martha and Mary and Lazarus' house. He does not go with haste, as the Gospels will say. He tarries on his way to get to their house. And we know that Martha, Mary, and Lazarus are good friends of Jesus because he appears numerous times in their house. And Martha and Mary in particular appear in numerous gospel readings. And so we know that he loved them and that he was good friends with them. And that their house was a place where he got to be Jesus. He wasn't Jesus the Messiah or Jesus the prophet or Jesus the one coming into the world. He was just Jesus. These were his friends. And yet his disciples told him that Lazarus was sick, and he, like I said, took his time getting there. And other readings from this will say that he was greeted by Martha and Mary, and they yelled at him and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." What a heartbreaking statement. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And they firmly believed that if Jesus hadn't taken his time getting to their house, they firmly believed that Lazarus would not be dead in the tomb right now. And yet Jesus doesn't respond to their anger with added anger. He does the reading from the funeral readings, where he says that Lazarus will be risen on the last day, that Jesus is the resurrection and the life, the one who is coming into the world. And Martha responds by saying, "I believe that you are the resurrection, and I know my brother will raise on the last day." That's how the funeral reading ends. And then we have the second half of the reading, which we hear today, where Jesus becomes greatly disturbed. And that greatly disturbed is poorly translated from Greek. What it really should be translated is Jesus is boiling mad. He is very angry. He is angry that Lazarus is dead. The first response that Jesus has to finding that his friend has been dead for 4 days is extreme anger. And that is a human emotion. And so Jesus becomes extremely angry that his friend has died, and he asks to be taken to the tomb. And then we have the shortest sentence in the entire Bible. Jesus wept. Here in the NRSV, the New Revised Standard Version, which is the readings that we use for the Episcopal Church, it says, "Jesus began to weep." In other translation, it's more poetic, and it says, "The tears of Jesus began to flow." But Jesus wept. Jesus cries at the side of the tomb. He sees other people weeping, and Jesus is overcome by emotion, and he cries. And he tells us in the gospel readings, we hear that Jesus has already told people that Lazarus has died so that the glory of God might be revealed. And so he knows what's going to happen. Jesus stands outside this tomb, and he very well knows exactly what he's about to do. He knows that he's going to ask the stone to be rolled away. He is going to call Lazarus out. Lazarus is going to exit the tomb as a living person. He will be unbound, and he will go about his life. Jesus is fully aware of how Lazarus' story will end. He has told people that much. Lazarus has died so that the glory of God might be revealed. I have told you as such. And yet, when he stands outside the tomb of Lazarus, he cries. And that is also a human emotion. Because even though Jesus knew full well how Lazarus' story was going to end, he knew that there would be celebration in a matter of moments. He was overcome by grief, and he cried for his friend. And so this reading is in funerals because of that theology. We know how the story of people who have gone before us, who have passed away, we know how their story has ended. We know that they are in heaven with God. We know that. And yet we come together to mourn them, and we cry, and we feel sadness. We might feel anger. We might be boiling mad. We feel the same human emotions that Jesus felt. And our gospel narrative today assures us that Jesus, who can raise the dead, also felt those exact emotions. We know how stories end, and it doesn't change the grief that we have today. So today is All Saints Sunday. It's the day in the church year that we set aside time to honor every person who has gone before us. And that's why we have a list in the bulletin of people who have died this past year, the list of names that you guys have submitted, the list of people who are close to you who have died. And in the Episcopal Church, we don't venerate saints the same way that the Catholic Church venerates saints. And we talk about, instead of sainthood, we talk about a great cloud of witnesses, a great cloud of people who are with God in heaven, who are witnesses to us and to our life that we can hope to emulate and be more like. And then in some churches, all across the Episcopal Church, divided hymn will be sung, which talks about being a saint too. And one was a farmer, and one was a teacher, and I want to be a saint too. I'm sure you all know this song. It is probably one of the most contentiously debated songs in the Episcopal Church, not for any theological purpose, but because people either really love the song or they really hate the song. And there doesn't seem to be a solid middle ground. And so in churches all across the Episcopal Church, for better or for worse, people will hear that song, some will love it, and some will feel like they're hearing nails on the chalkboard. But the reason that I love part of that song is the last line, where it says, I want to be a saint too. And like I said, in the Episcopal Church, we don't venerate saints like they do in the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church has a very specific theology around saints, and they have a very specific way that people are entered into sainthood. And that means that the people who are saints in the Catholic Church have to have performed two separate, well-documented miracles that were life-saving, called out in the name of Jesus. So they had to have two separate encounters with people who were standing by, ready to document them, where they prayed over people in the name of Jesus. Someone who was on death's bed, knocking on death's door, and then went on to live. They have to have two of those miracles well documented, plus a long other list of things that they need. But that requirement is probably one that none of us can reach. We're probably not going to have someone, a scribe, standing nearby when we perform a miracle. If we ever get to perform a miracle, we're not going to have those well-documented moments that would make us a saint in the Catholic Church. But what I love about that particular song that people either love or hate that talks about saints is that it lowers the bar to something that I can reach. It means that I could be a farmer or a teacher or a shepherd or a little boy on the street, as the song goes, and I can grow up to be a saint too. And that is more in line with the theology of the Episcopal Church, that we have this great cloud of witnesses, these people who have gone before us, to show us the way of how to live our life in a way that is human, full of mistakes, full of things that are hard, full of things that we wish weren't true, and one that is holy. And we can hold both things in tension. In our Eucharistic prayer today, we're going to say a special preface, which is one of the specific prayers they change for every season. And it's going to say that we're going to run with endurance the race that is set before us. And for me, I think the last time we were here, the bishop came and talked about run with endurance, the race that was set before us. He came right around All Saints last year. And he talked about running with endurance, the race that is set. It's not the race you choose, it's the race that you get when you have a set race. And for me, this All Saints, what I am remembering more than anything else, is that for the past over a year and a half since COVID started, we have lost more people than we have even the ability in our brains to comprehend how many people have died from COVID, let alone from COVID-related illnesses, from delaying care, from having not the ability to have good health outcomes because they lost their jobs and things like that. We have had numerous deaths to the point where we can't even comprehend how many people have died from COVID or COVID-related illnesses. And so this All Saints, it's set apart and different from every other one because it holds more heartbreak than the ones that we've experienced in the past. And yet we continue on the course that is set before us, following the great cloud of witnesses who have gone before us and trusting that if we just run with endurance the race that is set, when we are at our life's end and we are met in heaven with Jesus and we have people weeping at our grave like Jesus wept at Lazarus' grave, we can too be one of the saints of God. Amen.